Welcome to the House of Brand, where we help unleash the true potential of your brand. If you're a business owner, leader, or C-suite executive and you're ready to scale your business to new heights, you're in the right place. I'm Torey Azure, your guide in turning your brand into a strategic advantage for your company. In each episode, we get straight to the heart of what it takes to build a brand that drives growth, that shapes culture, and fuels your marketing efforts. So let's get started. Hey everybody, welcome to House of Brand. Today we have Thomas Walsh, our creative director. Thomas works out of our Boise office, and we're actually in our home office in Richland today, but welcome, Thomas.
Good to be here.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited about it. Today should be fun. We're going to talk about the visual part of branding, which on this podcast we don't talk a lot about, but I've talked to you about it a bit before, just about the design side. And, you know, I'll quickly define what we talk about with brand now in our agency, which involves words, it involves naming sometimes. Sometimes it always involves a messaging component. And then there's the visual side. And, you know, it's always, it's almost like a maturity maybe of an agency and also a maturity of a designer. When you start to, you know, as you get further and further along in your career, you start to understand how it all comes together a little bit more. And you realize that brand does mean something more than just the mark and just the logo. But it's also just as important. So it's about coming to that bigger understanding of, okay, how does this whole identity system and messaging system work within marketing? So you've been one of our designers, and there's been a couple that have really dug into the brand process. In other words, you've been a part of, I remember one of the projects we did where you were a part of not only messaging, but also naming, which we don't always get a chance to do. And that was a fun project that you jumped on. I think, let's start with this. Talk about why being involved in that broader scope in the brand process, or maybe you tell me, I would think it would help in the design when you get to that stage. Does it help? Or is it sometimes more challenging? What does it mean when you go through the process? And then at the end, now we have to create the visual of what this all means.
Yeah, I think it makes a huge difference to be involved in the process from the beginning. I think that, you know, the more context that, as a designer, the more context that you can have, it just gives you an opportunity to make the work stronger. It's kind of like, a lot of times as designers, you get a part or a piece of a puzzle, but you don't get the big picture. You don't get the full puzzle, and you're asked to, you know, here's this one little thing. Now do your thing and make it look good. That one little thing can typically be a lot stronger if we know the bigger picture and we can see that full puzzle.
Yeah. And I think also like your knowledge of the client and your knowledge of their personality and your knowledge of, you've heard them say things in the exercises that we do that I would imagine you can almost kind of, you know, self-select some design that they're going to like and not like, and actually maybe what's most reflective of the brand itself.
Yeah, I think that, you know, there's been times where we've all been, like, if let's say we have 4 different people in a meeting, we're going through the brand exercise. At the end, when we get together and kind of go through our notes and look at the work, we're all going to pick up different nuances, right? We're going to look at it. You may look at it and hear and see some things from a messaging perspective. I may take out some visual components that maybe you weren't paying attention to at the time. And if you're not a part of that process, a lot of those little details can be lost along the way. And so I think it's important to be there from the beginning, and then it just makes everything stronger, and you don't feel like you're missing anything when you dive into the work. Yeah,
that's kind of the problem when, you know, online they've got the $300 logo, you know, services and things like that. And they give you, you know, they're going to ask 10 questions. And then they're going to say, you know, what's your style? What do you like? And then a logo is just created and delivered to you.
Yep.
And, you know, and for our identity systems, it's more than the logo. Often it's, you know, other elements that go along with it. And those elements often tell the story as well. So, you know, it's important that we do really know the client and understand them. So I always have believed, so I've been a designer for, a long time. I worked basically as a freelancer for about 10 or 15 years, and now I've been in agency world. I think identity creation, logo design is one of the toughest things to do in design.
Without a doubt. I agree.
So why is that? Why is it when you have that in front of you, like, because when you first pull up your Illustrator document, right? and you have that blank screen there, why is it? Well, so I guess our past creative director, Paul Carew, would say that he doesn't start that way, right? He starts sketching and he starts on that. But why is it? Why is it so difficult? And maybe what do people not understand about like designing for brand?
I think when you brought up the $300 logo creation websites and things like that, I think that is part of the problem. You can ask 10 questions, put in 10 answers, and it's going to spit out, hey, here's a logo for you. People have this assumption that it's easy to do because logos are everywhere, right? Like you see them all day, every day, whether it's on merchandising or cars, or they're literally everywhere. But one of the reasons that make them so difficult is just that, I talked to a designer before who did sports logos, and one of the things he said, he's like, there's only so many ways you can draw a dog, and that really stuck with me because he's right. And I think that's where some of the difficult aspects of logo design come into play, is that there are only so many different ways you can do an acronym of the letter A. There's so many different ways you can draw a river and a mountain. And so I think that's what makes the brand side of things more important, because those elements, the visual language, the messaging, are going to make all of that work a lot stronger.
Often we call the people that do the kind of work that we do in design creatives. And I'm like, okay, yeah, we are creatives, but I think a lot of people are creative.
Yeah.
Even people that aren't designers are creative.
Oh, absolutely.
Like there's a lot of creative people out there. And I would say there's times when, for instance, I worked on a project this week where I did an annual report for a client, and they delivered their logos, they delivered their colors, they delivered everything, right? And it was much more of a production job.
Right.
I was just taking what they had, and certainly there's a creative aspect to that, but nothing like when you have that blank slate and your job is to come up with a logo and they want something completely different,
right,
and they want colors to be fresh, and they want to have this big impact. How do you get through that? Like, what are some of the things you try and do to start to narrow that down to a couple options, or one or two or three options? And is it quick at first, or what's your process like?
I think it varies, right? I think that there's times when I can sit down with a client, have a really clear direction, have an idea, and it just moves really, really quickly. There's times where I sit down with a client, have a clear direction, and I just keep going in circles. I can't figure it out. You can tell early on because you jump between different aspects of it, right? You jump, maybe it's color, maybe it's type, maybe it's and you never really stick on anything. And so it can really be up and down. I don't think any logo that I've ever done has been the same.
How do you get through that period where feels like you're not making progress? It feels like you're not getting. I get into a stage sometimes where I feel like I'm doing the same thing over and over
again.
And I tend to like to just step away from it for a while and then come back. Is there anything else you like to try and do to like get through that block?
Yeah, one of the things that I tend to do is I try not to jump on the computer too early. I think that when we do that, we're kind of limiting ourselves because we have the internet right there in front of us, so we can constantly look at different things. And one of the things that I really enjoy doing is going to the library. I think that you can get inspiration in all different places.
Interesting.
But library has everything, right? Like if you were to I go back to middle school and high school, like if I was going to do a research project, that's where I would start. And a lot of times it's like just going to the library, getting a change of scenery, looking at something that's physically there, not just on your computer screen. Jumping into different work too, like jumping into production work, jumping into web, where you're kind of switching off that side of your brain. But I think it's important to not keep beating your head against the wall. You just pause, take a step back.
I think some of our designers have started to learn that, I think most designers want to work on brand.
Oh, all of them. Always.
Always want to work on brand. And I think one of the things even they realize, and it can happen on web too, but they realize it's hard to have the brain. It's hard to have the focus and the capacity in your brain needed to really work on brand all day long. So those breaks where you get to work on some production stuff or step away or do it, I think actually helps when you come back to it.
Absolutely.
To just, because I think it's probably talked about in the creative world, how much pressure there is on the creative aspect when you have to come up with the ideas. Like, it's tough to come up with ideas, especially when you know they're going to get critiqued pretty heavily.
Oh, absolutely. And it's draining, right? Like you put your heart and soul into the work that you're doing. You're creating something that doesn't exist, right? So you're creating it for the first time ever. You put everything into it, and there's a chance that you're going to show this to somebody and they're going to tear it apart.
Yeah.
They're going to hate it. They're not going to like it. And so you develop a thick skin pretty early on, but it can be exhausting. Like there's times I go home, my wife's just like, "Oh, you look like you've had a rough day." I was like, "Oh, work was great. I just was working on logo all day," and it's just draining.
People think of that when it comes to attorneys. They think of it when it comes to other people that just have to really put a lot into every day. And I'm sure that is, it's certainly true for them, obviously. And I think that creatives often are looked at as, well, you're just having fun and you're just doing, this or that. Yeah. It's like, man, sometimes it's hard to articulate to people how difficult it is to concentrate and how difficult it is to find solutions. And of course, we're always working with a budget and we're always working with hours. And that's another added pressure is, if I had a project, especially on brand, where there was no limit on hours, I think the stress would be much less.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
Eventually I'll find a solution here.
Right.
But when I have to do it in 20 hours or 30 hours, now all of a sudden the pressure's on when, especially I've sketched for a while and we just can't quite get there. I mean, I haven't quite got there yet. Interesting idea with the library. I haven't been in a library probably in about 15 or 20 years.
Having kids helps. They really like going to the library.
I don't think I brought my kids to the library either. So that must have been, it wasn't mom's job either, but maybe it was the grandparents that brought them. So I don't even know what a modern library looks like inside. I assume they still have books.
They do. They are different. They have like 3D printer areas. They have tech is obviously a big component. The libraries in Boise are great. Like I think that was one thing growing up in a small town in Idaho. Our library was kind of a library. And then now in Boise, it's like you go in here and it's just like kids actually really enjoy going to the library because there's tons of activities and things for them to do. It isn't just about reading. They have video games you can rent.
Yeah. So good energy in the library, and that seems like it would help on the creative side. You've had a long career in design. You've got a ton of experience. What is a brand project that you haven't been able to do yet that would be like your dream job? Like if this group or company or band or whatever it is came to you, sports team, and said, "Hey, we want you to work on our next brand," like what would that one be?
That's a really good question. I've gotten to work on. I'm a big sports fan. I'm a big soccer fan. I got to work on the Basque Soccer Friendly branding in Boise, which is just kind of this random opportunity, but was kind of like my dream. One of the things I do, and I think a lot of designers probably do this, I look at these really big corporate brands that have been created and I'm like, I could do better than that. I'm not going to call any out, but that's one of the things is it's like some of these brands come out and it's like, oh man, like I think I would have been able to do a better job than that. And I think a lot of times, being in smaller areas of the country, you feel like you may or may not get those opportunities. And you think, and you make assumptions, right? Like, oh, they go to these really large agencies, they paid a fortune to have this work done, and we would have done such a better job with that. And so I think it's just getting an opportunity to work on brands that have a really, really large reach is something that I would love to do more of.
I've been a Washingtonian my whole life, and I think if I got a chance, and I think that the Mariners logo and brand is very dated. If I got a chance to tackle that one, I would definitely, that would be a dream for me to tackle the Mariners. I think I would leave the Seahawks alone. I really like their brand. I don't think I would do anything.
It's fantastic.
Yeah.
The color, what they've done with color, and you walk into that stadium and it's just a vibe and it works. Yeah. They've done a great job.
And then here in Washington State, we also have the Kraken, and their in-game experience and what they do with their brand there is just really awesome. It's really cool. In fact, we had a chance to do a project for Climate Pledge Arena, at least, where we did some in-house graphics during the Kraken game. So, we both picked. Well, we didn't both pick sports. You actually said that grabbing one of those big, like Fortune 500s would be cool to design. I agree with that. There's also some Man, I am in sports. I'm not a huge sports fan, but like something in the PGA Tour where there's a product or something like that in golf. I'm a huge golf fan,
Yeah.
so that would be a ton of fun. I'm not really a band guy, so no like rock and roll bands. I'm not even sure that's important as it is today. Remember in the past, like if you look at hair bands in the 80s and 90s,
deal. Yeah.
how much the logo meant, like AC/DC and Metallica, like everyone knew the logo. And in fact, today people still wear all those shirts of those very well branded bands. And I think of modern bands, like who has a mark like that? Like there's very few, I think. Maybe there is, and I'm just not paying attention.
I think part of it's hard because we don't get the albums like we used to, like with the album cover. I've noticed like on Spotify and stuff, they do have, some of them do have kind of a mark, but for the most part, it's the power of the name.
Yeah.
And that it's some kind of cool image. One thing that would be interesting, I don't know if it falls into branding per se, but kind of being into shoes and Nike and seeing a lot of the really cool work that they do and how different their sneakers are. I kind of look at those as a brand project as a whole. Like when it's, it's not just the swoosh that's on there, the Nike check. It's like, oh, what colors are we going to use? What textures are we going to add to this? What details? Like the amount of depth and detail that they go into visually with their products would be really cool. I always joke, I know the guy who designed the Boise State logo, and it's great. Like it's been around for quite a while, and I always joke with him like, oh, one of these days going to get an opportunity to redo that one. He's like, go for it every time. He's like, I've got 7 different Bronco versions that I'll send you, and you can pitch them. So
I always wonder this, like, did he think that they chose the one that he liked?
No, it's never. Never. He does like it. They went back and forth because the old one was like if I'm remembering this right, it's like a full Bronco, like the full horse. And so he actually thought that they kind of took a leap from where they were to where it is now. He loves the mark. He's always been really proud of it. But the type has been one thing that's been really interesting to him, like the Boise State thing, because that kind of gets taken out of the designer's hands at some point. And then Nike obviously jumps in. They work with the university. And that's one thing that he always talks about is like, oh, I wouldn't have done the type that way. Or if I would have known they would have used the type in merchandising in that way, I would have done it a little bit different.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yep, that just kind of goes with the territory.
Yeah, they do a good job with their, I think their colors are awesome too. Yeah. That blue and the orange just work so well together. And it's such a standout from anything else anybody else is. I don't know why. I think it's the orange, which you just don't see. Well, I guess Oregon State has like an orange and a black. But
yeah. Florida has, I think, blue and orange.
Yeah, the Gators.
Yeah. But yeah, there is something about it. The field, right? Like I think having the blue field, we've always been tied to the blue more so than the orange, just because of the fields. But yeah, you're right. The color palette, I mean, going to school there, you get tired of it. You have the Pantone swatches memorized of those 2 colors. You're only allowed to use those 2 colors. And so that can get old after a little while. But,
yeah, that's interesting. I went to Washington State, and, you get tired of the maroon and gray. And so you go to the Bookie, which was what we called the bookstore, the Bookie, and they would have sweatshirts and hoodies in all different colors. Yeah. Like you could get black, you could get blue, and you were like, that's kind of weird. Like that's not the colors. But look, everyone gets tired. You can't wear all maroon. You're, or crimson, I should say. I'm going to get called out by the WSU people out there if I don't call it crimson.
But like even in branding, I think why obviously we're both sports fans, but leaning into it, I think the consistency with sports branding, it changes, but the core elements do not, right? Like I don't imagine the colors of Washington State have changed as long as you can remember. The colors of Boise State haven't really changed as long as I can remember. I think of like Notre Dame, Alabama, like they'll never change. It's like every season they may update some things, they may add some cool elements to the visual language, but those core elements will always be consistent.
That's true. And in sports it's hard to change colors too. I mean, you just have teams, no 2 teams want the same color, so you're always trying to figure out where you fit, and position yourself. I guess we talk about positioning, but you have to position the team. All right, next question. If you could give, we probably have some designers that are going to watch this at some point. If you could give a designer like who wants to do more brand and identity work, but really hasn't had a chance, I know you've worked in education and you work with designers, young designers coming up through college. What kind of advice would you give them on trying to build a portfolio or build that skill set to be able to be a logo designer?
One of the things that I think is overlooked is research. I tell designers all the time, like if you think that you're going to design a logo or a brand that is impactful without knowing anything and everything that you can learn about this company, you're completely off base. It has so much more to do with like, it's have an hour meeting with the client. You're going to know everything you need to know about them. And here you go. It's like, no, you need to research the industry, research parallel industries. One of the things that's fairly common in the corporate world is people copy each other. You know, companies can be afraid to take too big of a drastic step away from their competition, even though they want to stand out from their competition. They don't want to be the ones to take that leap that doesn't work. And so a lot of times, if you're just looking in that industry, you're not really going to learn anything. And so you have to dig deeper, and you do need to learn as much as you can, and just doing research and learning what you can visually. I think people assume that graphic design is new, you know, from the technology side of things. And it's like been around for a lot longer than people realize. And so it's like, there's a history to a lot of what we do. And it's not hard to find, but you can go back and look at some of the work that was done by like Saul Bass and some of the older designers, and like that foundation has already been set. And so if you're not researching and kind of looking back and digging deeper and doing that research, your work is not going to be as good.
I mean, trends are always a part too of what's going on in the design world. And we always say that we try not to be trendy. I mean, I always say that. But, you know,
it's kind of impossible.
Yeah, it's kind of impossible. Like we all see like what's happening out there. Like right now, I would say we're in this world of design that is very stripped down. It's very flat and very clean and I just wonder, like, do we go back to more of an illustrated type of logos and I don't really see it right now in the near future, but I do wonder, like, what is the next phase? Like 3D isn't really a thing, you know, the whole drop shadows. Designers are always kind of moving away from this really realistic, like, and so it's hard for me to imagine, like, I wonder what's next. I wonder what's out there and that is going to define what design looks like for the next 20 years.
One of the, a cool exercise that I saw is a designer online, I can't remember his name, but he took a handful of like NFL logos and he turned them into what they would look like if they were soccer logos.
Interesting.
And so it was really cool to see kind of the trend of like, you know, that there's a definite look and feel to soccer compared to, you know, American football. And it was kind of that, right? Like, okay, no more shields, no more heavy embosses and drop shadows. Like everything was clean, simplified, pulled out, and beautiful. Like the work was really cool, but it didn't feel like football, you know? And so I think that some of those trends have a feeling that go along with them, and you can only strip out so much until you get to a point. I do think one of the things that is interesting about logo design and makes it another aspect that makes it difficult is the fact that you can't be super detailed in a logo. And so there's only so much you can do to have something look good at the size of a postage stamp. And so, I'm curious too. I don't know where it will go.
That last thing you said is I think why the challenge to be creative is so difficult in mark and identity and logo design, because of what you just said. The best marks really are so damn simple and paint the picture so well and can't be forgotten that you're like, damn. And that's why some people will say, you hear this all the time. Some people will say, well, I could have designed that. It's like, that's not the point.
Yeah, not the point.
Yeah, now you can. You can look at it and trace it and you can redo it. But to come up with that originally, that simplicity that means something to the brand is so difficult.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Look at the Nike. Like everybody uses Nike as an example, right? And it's like, oh, yeah, I could have done that swoosh.
I could have done that. Yeah.
Everybody could have. Yeah. You're right, but you didn't.
Yeah.
And look where it's gone.
Yeah.
And so.
And this is where we sit.
Yep.
All right. Well, I think that is a great way to close, Thomas. I appreciate you being here.
Yeah.
It was a great conversation. And thank you guys for watching, and stay tuned for the next episode of House of Brand.